Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of This Week in the Metaverse, the podcast from Site Network. My name is Graham, and in today's episode, we are going to be talking a lot about film and TV and how they play a part in the tourism industry. And the guests today are going to be part of a solution with Site Network that's going to rewrite the game, quite honestly, in how fans engage with their favorite TV series and movies. But before we delve into the topic at hand, I'm going to pass over to our CEO, Damien, for a quick word with you all in the community. So, Damien, take it away.
Lovely. And I did pick up on that word quick with a little bit of emphasis there. So I will keep this short, Graham. Good morning, good afternoon, all. And thank you for joining us on the live cast. For those of you that don't know anything about Site Network, we are building a immersive network of worlds which will be open, so worlds of our own and connecting to other immersive experiences. But we're very much focused on the tourism industry. And starting with two dominant locations, one Edinburgh in Scotland, and looking at the Mayaverse, Mexico in South America. So that's very quickly what we're about. I've mentioned we're focused on tourism, and just briefly, we see the move in tourism of people moving up the value curve from traditional vacationing, for want of a definition, up to where they want to have more experiences and more engagement and more entertainment from a tourist experience. And that really plays to the opportunities from immersive worlds, which gives a whole set of different experiences that can be delivered. And what the fascinating conversation with Yanni's quite visionary is around how we can use fan fiction and how we can use the power of immersive worlds and a global network to get people involved in immersive fiction and fiction going forward and fiction film together. So I'm excited to listen to the chat today, take part in the chat, and look forward to hopefully meeting some of you in the future.
And as a segue into the topic, it's a really interesting time for us to be working with a team that's looking at rewriting the game on fan fiction and fan engagement in TV and movies, given that Hollywood is going through quite a lot of changes at the moment. There is a particular scandal that we won't name just in case YouTube don't like it very much, but that particular scandal is causing a lot of ructions in the entertainment industry. In addition, Hollywood is being accused of really being about sequels and repeats, not a lot of really genuinely new films coming out, and also it's facing the challenge of AI now that we have a fully AI enabled movies coming out. So it's an apt time to be looking at how tourism and the technology that we're developing at Site Network can really help in reestablishing a new way of doing business in Hollywood. And that's the aim of Yanni and his team. So, in order to get started, let's do some introductions. Now, we do have one person to introduce who is off camera. So, although you'll see 5 people on screen, there is actually, trust me, 6, and you'll hear his voice in a minute. But I'd like to first ask Lisa Gibbons from the Metaverse Tourism Association, to talk a little bit about herself, how she came to work with Site Network, and the work of the MTA. So over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Graham. It's so lovely to be here. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone around the world that's tuning in. My name is Lisa Gibbons. And a couple of years ago, I think it was around 4 years ago now, I bumped into Graham at a conference. We were both speaking on a panel just about this topic and about the way content is being used in the metaverse and how the metaverse is transforming the way we're being entertained. My background is I have a master's in international tourism, studied it professionally for 2 years. That took a lot out of me. And I've worked in tourism for 15 years. So tourism on the marketing side, mostly. I founded my own tour operator based on food and foraging. And then I came into the world of Web3, and I saw very interesting new ways of monetization, new business models, and I was hooked straight away. So I've been in the Web3 space around 5 years now, and I'm an advisor to some projects, and I really believe in everything that Site Network is doing. I'm quite close with Graham since the start, and I met the rest of the team, David and Damien. I know you're doing incredible work. So I'm happy to be here and be part of the conversation, because I feel like where tourism is going and where the metaverse is today is kind of the future. It's part of the future. So I don't feel it's if, I feel like it's when that's going to happen. So I think we're at the cusp and at the edge of that. So it's great to be here.
And Lisa, we're really pleased to have you. And we learned a lot, or I learned a lot when we met at that event about the work you did with Sandbox. So just for the benefit of some of the community who may use Sandbox as one of the metaverse worlds that they play with, could you just mention a little bit about the project you did there and the success you had with it?
Yeah, we have a lovely project with the Sandbox. Thankfully, I'm very persuasive when I want to be. So we met Sebastian at the NFC conference 3 years ago, co-founder of the Sandbox, and we were having coffee. And I said, "Oh well, if you have a metaverse, then you should have some attractions in the metaverse that people want to go to." And I said, "Why don't we build you an Irish pub?" So we partnered with a gaming studio out of Brazil, and we built the first Irish pub in the Sandbox. And it's a really good, fun experience. It was really mind-blowing, the amount of detail that we had to go through with the gaming studio in terms of the design. So I've learned a lot in that process. And it's live. It's not yet multiplayer. As far as I know, it's still single-player mode. But we really like it, and we want to expand on that idea. And that is definitely in my roadmap, to bring Irishness into the metaverse, into the online world. And feel free to go in and play around and have fun in the Irish pub in the Sandbox.
Yeah, fantastic. I can't think of a better thing to do in the metaverse than go to a pub. I mean, that's a very Scottish thing, isn't it? Yanni, would you like to say a few words about you and your organization?
So my name's Yanni Payne. I'm the Chief Creative Officer and founder of It's Oak Development. It's Oak is an acronym for In the Shadow of a King, the book that you see behind me on the wall there. And I wrote that book years ago without going into too long of a story. Wrote it years ago. It was told it was too controversial to publish, and I decided to kind of step out and do it on my own, self-published, tried a few different things. And then I decided, like, I don't know, some kind of genius, that making a film would be easier. It was not. But I wrote multiple screenplays, all as standalone prequels to the book series. Got things moving forward. Had some really great traction. Had again, without going into it, things that I had to deal with. So I had to put projects to the side. 2020 rolled around. At that point, I had been working in and out of film for 12 years, I think, at that point. So then I wrote another one in 2020 when we were all sitting around in lockdown. Couldn't do very much. Things were literally locked down. So, but the protests that were happening, I really wanted to use my voice to do something to help out, because I have I have my son full time all the time. I couldn't take him to protest. He was 6 years old at the time, and I was like, I'm not taking my 6-year-old to a protest. But what can I do? So I wrote An Accidental Fire as a feature. And Damian, who we'll hear from in a moment, he and I had connected. We made some. He blew me away with his ability, his understanding of the world and the characters, and I invited him to help me develop the character of Troy within that story. And through him, we also got connected with Warner Brothers, and we were given a grant, a sizable grant from the 150 through their incubator program, and a first look deal to expand it into a TV series. So we did, and it was amazing. And then, more things happen. As I always say, things happen the way they're supposed to, and it's not always pleasant, but they happen the way they're supposed to. So we we submitted our deliverables and everything was going well, but then because of the Warner Discovery merger, the 150 got transitioned out, and then right behind that, the writer strike happened. So we were just kind of stuck. And so this year, after I kind of had some restructure time in my head to figure out what I was going to do with it, I decided, I really wanted to get into this co-creation aspect of things, as we'll get into. But the co-creation side was really where I wanted to go with it. And then fortunately, as fate would have it, I met Jamie, and Jamie connected me to Site Network, and a couple months went by, and after lots of talking, we officially formed a partnership, and here we are. I couldn't be more excited to work with you guys and what we're all putting together.
Yeah, fantastic. And Damien, I know you're there in the background. You're our ghost on the podcast today. Do you want to talk a little bit about your character? I know Troy is very central to the story, and it's quite a powerful character. And if I may say, when I look at your reel, you seem to have a habit of playing powerful characters. So do you want to talk a little bit about Troy and what he's going through in An Accidental Fire?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Damian Rochester, or you can call me Elijah for short. So Troy is a character that, he shouldn't, the stuff that has happened to Troy, it shouldn't happen. He's a character who's just like, why are these things happening to you? Because you're such a, in terms of what it stands for about being American, right? You have this good moral person who does great for society, the community. He's a teacher. He teaches middle school, and he doesn't really. He's not a fighter, but his past, his family, his dad went to protest and stuff like that. His uncle did the same thing, but he wasn't raised with his dad because his dad was incarcerated because of that. America has a way of punishing those who stand up for themselves, even at the slightest. So his father was taken away, taken from him. And I think Troy's story is significant because it tells us, regardless, that it's important for us to fight against evil, corruption. And we have to have a pause. No one just wakes up and says, "Okay, well, I just want to protest against the government today," or "I just want to pick a fight," with an international community. It has to come from, you have to be fighting for something, and I think Troy, you get to see what those things are without sharing too much, because you have to read the book or watch the series or enter the world to actually understand why he decides to fight, and fighting for a better future, fighting for his soul, fighting for the children, for others who can't fight for themselves. And so I think the story that we created, or the world that we created, it mirrors our real world. And I believe that many people will drawn to Troy because he represents so much, strength, courage, hope, savior at some point, educator, a learner, a friend. He's going through so many emotions all at once. So yes.
Yeah, and I think we can probably all agree that when you look at the trailer and you see the concept behind it and what's actually happening with those riots, it's all too familiar actually with what's going on in the world around us. And it was only last week that someone was showing some footage from, funnily enough, a riot, and I believe it's in Europe, and saying how close that looked to the whole idea of an accidental fire. So it's a very topical thing at the moment. So thanks for those introductions. And in order to have a segue into the conversation, I thought it might be fun to play a little game. So I'm going to explain the rules of the game. First of all, our budget doesn't quite cover buzzers yet, so you're going to have to make up your own buzzer noise. Okay, that's the first thing. Yeah, be as creative as you can possibly be. What you're going to see is images of locations that have featured in movies. For 1 point, you need to tell me the location. For 2 points, the movie that it featured in. And then you're going to get a statistic about tourism related to that specific movie. And if you get within 5% of the real answer, you'll get 5 bonus points. And the winner, well, the winner will receive the adulation of everybody on the stream, which is as much as you can possibly hope for, right? So let's
I didn't
begin.
sign up for this game.
So here we go. Let's see how you get on with this. Here is question number 1. What is the location and movie or TV show?
That's Home Alone.
Got a
Plaza.
buzz
Sorry.
in? Got a buzz in? Yeah.
All right, is that me? All right, so it's that looks like Home Alone and Trump Plaza, or the Plaza Hotel. Sorry.
Okay, so I can accept Home Alone and the Plaza Hotel for 2 points, but which Home Alone was it?
2.
Oh, that's all right. Home Alone 2. Yeah.
Yeah, well done. Okay, so that's 2 points. And for the bonus point, I need you to tell me, in the year 2023, what percentage of people staying at the plaza said they were inspired to do so after seeing it in Home Alone? You can get within 5% of the answer for 5 bonus points. What percentage of people were inspired to stay at the New York Plaza because of Home Alone?
20%.
20%, you say?
Mm-hmm.
The answer is 15%, which is within 5%. So, Yanni, you are on 7 points after the first question.
That was Damien.
It's okay. It's okay.
I'm-
Like I'm still on your team. It's fine.
All right.
Hey, you're butting up. That's not fair.
Yeah, let's do that then. Let's give Damien 5 for his contribution there as well. Okay, movie or TV series number 2.
Castaway? I don't know.
It's not Castaway. It's an iconic movie. This I'll give you some clues. This is the end scene. One of the characters is called Andy.
Oh, it's Shawshank Redemption.
It is Shawshank Redemption,
Oh.
yeah, for a point. But can you tell me the location that this happens in? They talk about it in the movie and they say that they want to meet there when they
do.
get out. And Red says that he hopes the Pacific is as beautiful in real life as it was in his dreams. But can you remember where they went together?
We need help from the audience.
Yeah.
Ask the audience. I don't remember the location.
Does anybody else want to steal? No?
Movie? Oh,
Okay. So the actual location is Zihuatanejo in Mexico.
Mexico.
And it's Mexico. So no points for anybody there. But what percentage of travelers to Zihuatanejo in 2020 said they were inspired to visit Zihuatanejo because of Shawshank Redemption? You can be within 5%.
I'm going to go higher. I'm going to go for 30%.
30% is not going to get you any points. Does anybody else want to have a go?
50%.
That's not going to get you any points, but you're getting warmer.
60.
I'll give you that. Yes, it's 65%
Wow.
of
Wow.
all visitors
Wow.
to Zihuatanejo go there specifically because of Shawshank Redemption. And I am a statistic in this because I have been for that
really?
reason as well. Yeah. It's in Guerrero. It's just 2 or 3 hours north of Acapulco. Really, it's quite out of the way. So you'd really only go there if you had a reason. And 65% at Shawshank. Next one might be more easy for people on the UK side of the Atlantic, but let's see how well TV and movies from the UK travel.
Train spotting.
The Train Spotting is correct.
Yes.
Can you name the location? Shouldn't be too hard.
Career?
Career. It is Career in the Highlands.
I feel that I was given an unfair advantage here.
And for the bonus point, what percentage of visitors to Career were inspired to go there by the movie Train Spotting? And this statistics from 2018.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah,
80%.
well, it is in the middle of nowhere, but a lot of people do go to the Scottish Highlands, so we're on a high benchmark. But I'm still going to hedge my bets and go for 30%.
Is absolutely correct. It's 35% of people visit Career because of Train Spotting. So that is, I make that 5 points plus the 2, so that's 7 points for you,
Am I in the
David.
lead?
Actually, scores at the moment, since you're interested. David and Yanni are both on 7. Damien is on 5. Lisa has 6, and Damien is being polite. He has none at the moment.
I gave David this one.
On to the next one. There's 2 left, and this is almost certainly the hardest, but it'd be interesting to see who knows. That's Arnold Schwarzenegger, but can we guess the movie? I'll give you some clues.
I know the movie. That's Terminator, isn't it?
It's not Terminator. It's one of the other ones he's famous for.
Total
I
Recall?
think that's Total Recall.
It is Total Recall. Well done, David. It's
Very
another
good.
point. Now, what is the location of this movie? Now, because it's quite difficult, I'm going to give you 5 points if you get it right, because you deserve it if you know this.
Couldn't tell from there.
I think
With-
that's
with
the
a
scene where
country?
he brings the lady's head out the bag, and she goes, "Get ready for a big surprise!" And I
Is it
think
New
it's
York?
an airport, and I think the airport is LAX.
LAX, no. Wrong country, wrong mode of transport as well, actually.
Oh, wow.
Anybody else want to have a go?
Is it? Does it look like New York to me?
I think James is
Mexico?
helping us here online. He's saying it's Mars. Although I do like the idea of the Amazon distribution center. Can I go for the Amazon distribution center on Mars?
Believe it or not, and this is and maybe a bit of a scandal, they filmed the Mars part on Earth.
What?
So it's not Mars, but it does represent Mars, actually.
Is it Mexico City?
Brilliant answer. Yes, it is Mexico City. You're correct.
Oh, I got it right.
Nice
It's
one.
Mexico City for 1 point. Now, we don't have a statistic on how many people go to this location in Mexico City for Total Recall, but I happened to post a comment in the last week about a visit that was made for Total Recall last week. So instead of the statistic, can you tell me who went to visit? Was it a family? Was it a father and son? Was it a mother and son? Was it an independent traveler? Who went to see this last week?
You? Was it you?
It wasn't me. It wasn't me, but it was somebody. It was somebody I know. Anyone want to guess what kind of group or couple would visit Mexico City specifically for Total Recall? It wasn't royals. No. It was a father and son. Damien, well done. That is a point. And the actual location, weirdly, a lot of this movie was filmed in the metro system, in the underground metro system in Mexico City. The reason why is because they said it looked futuristic and dystopian. I don't know if that's a compliment or not. Final question in the quiz. I think the series for this one's quite easy, but the location might be complicated. Let's have a look.
It's Outlander, isn't it?
It is Outlander. You didn't buzz, so I'm going to give you half a point instead.
Ho. I have a delayed. I have some latency on my buzzer. I don't know about it afterwards.
Okay, Outlander. Now, lots of Outlander was filmed in different forests, but do you know which forest this is supposed to be? I will give you some clues. It's supposed to be special. It's supposed to be lots of light and fairies are present in this forest, and it's in Highland Perthshire.
I've been there and I've walked there with the kids, but can I remember its name?
Almost certainly you have, yes.
No, I can't give you a name.
No? Anybody else? No? So it's actually a place called the Enchanted Forest. And interestingly, 70% of people who travel for film and tourism to Scotland say they come for Outlander. But can you tell me, for the statistic, what percentage of all travellers to Scotland specifically travel to see film and movie locations?
Oh.
I've been back at the 30% marker, but
30. I'll give you 30%. 33% of all travellers are for travel and movies. I think that answer has saved you slightly there, Damien. So at the end of all of that, Damien, Lisa, and Damien all have 6 points. David,
no, I have 7.
Lisa has.
Damien's got 7.
Yes, you're right. Damien has 7, and David is the winner with 8 points. So
I'm going to graciously concede defeat, though, because Eli actually got the really difficult destination. You were going to give 5 points for that, but you only gave
Yeah. You're right. Controversial there, yeah. So Damien would actually have 10 points and win. So congratulations, Damien.
Right on.
Win.
Congratulations is yours.
Okay. So, as we go into the main event and discuss the project with Yanni and Damien, I'm just going to play the trailer to An Accidental Fire, and then David, it will be over to you to lead the discussion.
Okay.
So here we go.
Overnight, violent protests erupting in Philadelphia.
Tear gas to
hours
break
after
the crowds
police
up.
shot and
Groups
killed
moved to
Officers ended up
multiple
taking
neighborhoods
nearly
across the city,
dozens of
rioting
people into
and
custody.
looting.
It's
All
almost 2
weekend,
hours
police
past
tried to
4:50
stop
p.m.
people destroying and
Dozens of
stealing
people
from stores, but were overwhelmed.
But hundreds of others continued to voice their anger at what they claim to be a broken, prejudiced system.
No matter what happens, never give up that beautiful hope that you have.
Hello, William.
You died. I need you to get me into the prison, as close to Troy Hudson as possible.
Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you.
Are you helping us? Because I see you.
Well, since then, the military is all over the place. People are disappearing left and right.
Ridley, have you contacted command?
What do you want me to tell you? Shadow Command is offline.
What do we do?
Do you want to live?
I don't do shit like this, man. I'm not a fighter.
Well, you are now.
There we go. Okay. So that's a good segue into talking about Shadow World and all of the work that Yanni and Damien are doing. David, over to you.
That this whole thing really really excites me. Just for the sake of anybody who doesn't know me and my role in Site Network, I've got a 25-year background in communications, and that's been everything from written words to image-based, video-based, and then over the last 10 years, virtual and augmented reality. And the reason for that is primarily because of my great interest in communication and all the different forms of communication. And I think that, you know, the Bard said a picture speaks 1,000 words. Well, a film speaks a million or more. And it's always been my favorite means of communication. However, we're actually getting to a stage where we can go a step beyond even that, and that's why we are quite excited about this. And Yanni and the team have been working together really closely to see how we can take such an exciting and internationally relevant concept, as the concepts are dealt with in a series of books and forthcoming TV series, and make them more accessible to more people and create more engagement with the fans in two directions. So Yanni, I'm going to ask you a question. Given that the internet, which, you know, we're communicating through right now, it has gone from being a Web 1.0, where it was very much a traditional medium, pedagogical, we would call it one-to-many, and basically you transmit information to an audience and the audience just receives it, to Web 2.0, which we're kind of in now, which is very much bi-directional, and that's affected everything. It's affected culture, it's affected politics, because now it's given a medium for the masses to communicate back and speak to power. But now we're moving into Web 3.0, where it's much more immersive and much more peer-to-peer. And I mean, God, we don't even know what it is yet because it's still occurring. How do you feel that could affect how you bring this movie to the world, and how you bring the series of books to the world?
It's a great question. I think there are multiple different things, as we've all discussed, right? And I think one of the most exciting things from my perspective is the idea of co-creation, being able to build this world with the readers and the audience. Like, you know, I wrote, as far as I'm concerned, the world that I wrote establishes the lore, but it's just the roots of the tree. It's not the tree, it's just the roots. So, you know, people can use that as the core canon and build anything they want around it. Tell your own stories. Like, you know, I've made the example to you guys a million times of if somebody wants to tell a story about it, they went to a gas station and they want to write a blog. They're travelers, because what is this? It's a travel network. So a traveler wants to tell a story about how they went to a coffee shop in I don't know, in Rome, but then they went, they got hopped on a train and went to Paris or Berlin or wherever they went to, and you know, in their travels, they're going to have their own stories. Well, all those stories, while they might be their independent ones and their individual stories, they're not going to affect the main storyline of the Shadows, but they can incorporate their stories to build the world around it. So they're literally building a world. Now, what happens if somebody who does want to create something in the Shadow world, and write a story or make a fan film or create a piece of art or whatever they have, but their story might coincide with with that blogger who was just traveling. And so the blogger might see the piece of art that this person from the Shadow world created. Now you've got a real world, story world blend that's coming together, where you're not just taking story elements and things that I've written about in there, but you're taking real world aspects and bringing story world things together and expanding and growing a true ecosystem, like a tree, like an oak tree. That's, I didn't make In the Shadow of a King an acronym on purpose. That was an accident. It was pointed out to me by an actor who read the book series a while back, and he's like, "Did you know this stands for that the acronym is It's Oak?" And I was like, "No." I didn't even put two and two together. So it just kind of happened. But the idea of an oak tree, which is itself an ecosystem for in nature, for life all around it, it really works with this.
I remember a discussion that you and I were having a little while ago, Yanni, where we were talking about how the interaction of fan authors, which has been a thing since Star Trek and fan fiction, and people getting involved in creating their own side, stories and narratives, which there's arguments for and against that affecting your core canon. And although you've, from the outset, been a massive proponent of the fan engagement and fan generation of fiction that branches off the main trunk in order to keep with the Soak analogy, you were always keen to make sure that the core canon, the core trunk, remains unaffected unless you decide. Right. But it does allow the freedom for these branching narratives to sprout off at any given point. How do you feel that this kind of media with virtual reality and augmented reality lend themselves to that? What kind of scenarios can you see that occurring in or being supported by?
I think this kind of media, the interactive space, is, because I don't even know what to call it anymore. There's XR, AR, VR, MR. There's so many R's. But the truly interactive and immersive experience that is available now through these newer types of medium is the only way that something like this would have actually survived, right? Like if I had tried to do this 5 years ago, it wouldn't have been the same, because it would have been an uphill struggle. It's a new IP, right? New IPs are difficult at best. Unless you've got a marketing engine of one of the major studios to sit there and just throw mountains of cash behind it, it's you're fighting a nearly losing battle unless you're lucky enough to go viral. With what we've got now and what you can see kind of through a number of smaller projects that are kind of coming up. Sorry, I was seeing something pop up here in the on the chat. What we're able to do now by being able to reach through and utilize Site Network's abilities, not in opposition with, but in parallel to the current social media systems and platforms and video distribution things that are out there, is to build a world where the digital twins within the cities and within the spaces are able to actually act kind of as their own distribution network for people in those spaces. And by utilizing those things, and not just in the Shadow world, but utilizing it across the space, we create an interactive network where creatives can actually use the space to reach more people, right? So that's on the kind of more global side, but when we're thinking about just the shadow world and what we're able to do in there, it would not have been possible previously. It would have taken a massive amount of push, and what we're doing, really, given the crossover and the availability of the types of media that we're using, it allows for an organic growth as opposed to a forced growth, a consumer-based growth. Now we got a prosumer, produce and consume type growth, where people are empowered. We want the readers, we want the visitors, the travelers, the filmmakers, whatever, to come in and create. And when you're doing that, you're creating an economy that is built on the merits and the work, the actual effort that people put in versus, being kind of forced to swallow whatever, regurgitated IP is getting pushed out there. I enjoy all the films that come out. I mean, I shouldn't say all of them, but I enjoy most of them. Most of the ones that come out, regardless whether it's superhero or sci-fi or whatever. But the major studios, and I understand why they go to tried and true, right? They know that old IPs have a foundation and a basis, and they make money. They know that, and it's fine. And we're all going to continue to go to the theater to see them, because the bigger the spectacle, the bigger screen we want, the whole 9 yards. But what if we're able to take that spectacle and put it in front of us, literally in front of us? And that's what we're doing, and not just in front of us, but we can live in it too.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, and what you were saying about all the R's, I'm going to differentiate between the VR and the AR for a second here, just to contextualize this. But what you're talking about, the public forum, the ability for people to come together and interact, of course, is something that virtual reality lends itself particularly well to. And although and Graham's already done a great job of showing how films affect the tourism industry, well, given that Site Network was developed as a tourism platform, this will give us an opportunity to clarify why are we working with films. But your film and your series of books takes place all over the world. There's locations everywhere and different time zones as well. And that lends itself to two things. One of them is in virtual reality, particularly kind of virtual reality that we have, which can be streamed to any device. Anyone who is a fan or a reader can go to any of those locations, any of those times, and come together with other people, just as we develop for tourism, but within the book, and experience scenes from the inside with other people, and even start to create their branching narratives as they watch a scene unfold in a bar, and they end up having another conversation with somebody else, and that creates a branching narrative. But then also virtual reality being you can go anywhere, but you are very much in the virtual experience. Augmented reality being you are in the physical environment, but there's an additional digital layer on top of that. And you can access that from a phone or glasses or goggles or whatever, but these days, most of the phones. It means that when people do travel to these locations, some in Scotland, some in Mexico, it very much ties in with the places that we're starting out with Site Network. They can see these scenes unfold around them. They can see these changes occur. They can connect with the places and objects that have been left behind in the narrative. And as we've seen from other augmented reality real world games like Pokemon Go, it massively increases the likelihood of people to go to and interact with a place, even beyond just the movie thing. And we don't even know how much it's going to increase it, but I suspect it's going to be more than the sum of its parts. So these 20-30% upticks that we were talking about earlier on, I think they're going to double. But that's my take on it. But Damien, and actually, given that your name is now Elijah, I'm going to make sure to stick to that. So Eli, what are your thoughts about one of the aspects of this, which is that we will be able to place characters from the book series into these locations, and with an augmented reality, with an artificially intelligent backing, people will be able to interact with you, with your character in different locations in the world, but you're not even going to be there. How does that feel to think that you'll be actually embodied and communicated with live when you're not even in the conversation?
I think that's really it just shows the power of AI, and that's where we are today. So especially being a creator, I think it gives you the ability to reach a lot of people all at once. And it creates a sense of freedom as well for creators who may not see a representation of themselves on film, or a type of story or narrative that they really have, but there really isn't a segue for that. Maybe, on the TV show itself, but within the world that's created for them, there's a lot more room to play. So I think that, it's a beautiful thing. So if someone maybe wants Troy to interact with maybe his mom's side of the family or something like that, right? And they want to know more about where his fight is coming from or stuff like that. And so they're like, well, let's write more about this and explore more. And they can actually do that in the shadow world. And I think for the purpose of traveling globally and stuff like that, even if Troy is not really written in the show, to go to these places, the fact that they can create a conversation that they want to see happen with Troy, someplace else with another character or what have you. It shows us as how creative people really are. So it gives us power. I think it gives us the creative power to, I would say, you're putting, there's a lot of unity that's going on, because you're actually putting different people in the same space, and they have to cohesively craft the story. It still has to make sense. It's still a part of canon. So all this, it's kind of like there's a lot of people working together. I haven't seen how the layout looks yet, but I can see that it should be seamless. Considering that we'll most likely have moderators. I'm hoping, right? So I'm hoping we'll have moderators. So if the story is going too left, or we can actually say, hey guys, we're gonna kick you out, or you have to stay true to what the canon of the world is. But in short, it's great because it really shows the flexibility of your artistic muscles, and it gives freedom again, just to play.
That's some really interesting points there. And given, as Yanni's stressed to me, what makes you such a talented actor and such a great choice for this particular role is that you need to be completely immersed in the backstory of the character, which is something which frequently doesn't come across on television or film. Is all of the information that you carry with you in order to embody that character that makes you better at embodying that character, but most viewers never get to find out about it unless they really get into the kind of backstory and the writing, and usually that's years after the case. But as you're saying, being able to actually embody that into the AI powered virtual characters means that people can, with inquiry, find that out. Anyone can find that out, and it means that you get that additional level of engagement, which is fantastic. Lisa, I wanted to take this to you because you've got a really strong background, not only in these technologies, but in virtual and augmented reality as well. How do you see this affecting tourism with the locations that are featured in this, either through augmented or virtual reality, as described by Yanni and Eli?
I love what you guys are saying. And Yanni, I'm going to rob the prosumer. That's like genius. So if you don't have IP on that, we're robbing that today.
Oh, don't rob it from me. Rob it from Jamie, and they were his group's the one that came up with that.
Robbing it from you guys. That term is really interesting because I do think the world of co-creation in Web 2, we've gotten very used of limiting ourselves in a way, putting up barriers and that has transpired into the web today as well. we put up the walls, we build the platforms, we have a user experience, this is what happens, and we're very it's very controlled in a way. And I think that has limited us in terms of innovation and in terms of where we want to be with these technologies. And I feel like with AR and VR and gamification of places, that we're really getting to a place now where people themselves are going to be immersed enough to be able to create alongside the creators of the world. So like Yanni, who's written a book, authors, or people who do amazing photography, or the creators are there doing their thing. Now it's like, oh, can I work alongside you? Can I help you build something? And that's the people are scared of AI taking jobs. I'm like, let AI take all of those jobs. Let AI take all the office jobs they want, and let us co-create and do amazing innovations in the world of immersive technology. As we see, that's where I see the real excitement coming. And I love, the more I learn about what you guys are doing, the more I feel like I'm attached to it, and I'm on the same road as you in that journey towards using place and tourism and culture as the kind of basis and base place of us seeing the potential of these technologies, so I think that's the stage we're at, and I think this is exactly where we are meant to be, and the discussions we're meant to be having.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I call it to Jamie Schwartz, who came up with the name prosumer and was actually our original introduction to Yanni in the first place, and is working with us in the background and on many related projects. So well done, Jamie. Damien, what is your take on this? Because I mean, you've been doing this from you're effectively the main reason that Site Network became a thing in the first place. You had a vision for this the very first time that Graham and I and you met at an event in Glasgow 3 years ago.
A while ago now. Yeah, I mean, I think there's some really interesting points there. I think the point, getting the tourism market to understand that this is a new channel and a new way of attracting people and getting to create new experiences is really, really powerful. And Lisa, I could not agree with you more. It's about when, not if, and it's that that challenge of making sure we're at the right place at the right time. We think we are, but it's super interesting. I think that point, and I think going back to Yanni's point, I think this idea, co-creation allows people to imagine places that they haven't been and create stories that are in those places, and that will drive them to go to those places. And there's a sort of a linear flow that can be managed. I know, Lisa, you're slightly pushing back about let's not be too predictive, but I think there's a journey we can take people on, give people an option to go with, a sort of metaphorical journey. I think that is super powerful. And you mentioned the AI bit. I when I saw the Sora stuff coming out this week, which is the OpenAI's sort of video generation next iteration, it made me think of Yanni, because I couldn't help but thinking, if we have people who are building their sub-canon stories, to be able to then very quickly be able to visualize those stories and then implement them into our world, so that the quality of their story really reinforces the main canon. I think that's just I think it might be one of those things that's just gonna flip the amount of people that get involved in generating content. And I think that more people will realize they can be generators. You don't have to be just one of a very sort of intelligent few that can build film. So I think there's something really exciting with all that means that bringing together a sort of fiction, film, immersive worlds and tourism, it's just a super exciting mesh.
I'd like to take this back to Yanni and Eli for this next question. Given that the character that you portray, Eli, is a teacher, and given that your background as a professional is in performing arts, both of these are about communication. I've got a background in education myself, so it's something that's very close to my heart. How do you feel this lends itself to communication in both directions, but different types of communications for different kinds of people? How does this help people learn about and feed into in different ways? Because up until now, we've had, you have to be able to understand the English language, or to follow this story, or or the cultures there. You have to be able to read in order to read the books. Yeah, but then you've got people with different sensory capabilities. You've got people who are neurodivergent, many of whom get very much into these kind of narratives because they provide them with an easier escape route or whatever. But in terms of accessibility and communication, how do you feel from a personal level this kind of approach helps yourselves to communicate and others to communicate with you?
That's a great question. But I think it's, like acting itself or performance, you can remember before there was sound in cinema, it was silent film, right? And then it was also, it's black and white. So, but what people in was the story itself through maybe it's body language, or maybe it's a situation, and they tie into it because you're like, well, yeah, I would react under a similar circumstance. So I think as a performer, we've been told that our greatest gift is our voice, to tell the story and how you use words and the diction of words and tone of words and stuff like that. But if someone doesn't speak English, so they're not really hearing that, but what are they seeing, right? They're seeing maybe it's a facial expression, or maybe it's the dynamic between two characters, or a character and him or herself, the struggle that someone can identify with. And so I think what is going to be clear is the story itself. What is going on, for the character, with the characters? How are they interacting with the world around them? You get to see that, and people they'll get to see that. If Troy's in a space that he's not comfortable with, and he's never been there before or met a certain group or institution, if we suspend our belief, and we, the audience, put ourselves in that a situation, we're gonna say, I understand why he's freaking out, or I understand why he wants to save, his family, or what have you. It becomes more of a tangible experience for them, because it's not necessarily language. It's it's a human struggle, and I think we all can identify with causes that are centered around aid and suffrage and humanitarian relief, and just having more of a social consciousness about how people want to be treated. And I think that's a global thing, and not necessarily one that comes from words, but you get to see it in actions in real time.
That's great insights, Eli. They certainly lend it ties into and backs up some of the experiences that we've had in developing this technology over the years. You can have years of communication with people using Zoom, as many of us have encountered since COVID and during COVID. When you meet them for the first time physically, yeah, you know them, but there's not quite the emotional engagement. But one of the odd things that we discovered when we were testing out that kind of interaction in virtual reality, and this is even with very, very rudimentary, kind of almost like Lego Roblox figures, when we'd had those interactions with people in virtual worlds and we ultimately met them physically, there's a whole different story. People would say, I feel like I know you. There would be hugging, there would be tears, and there's an emotional engagement, and we couldn't understand why. Now, we've heard the statistics of, the proportions of human communication, which are non-verbal, but it's only when you experience it like that that you really see the power of it. And what you're describing there, you were taking that still further. The actual body language interactions between multiple participants have never even occurred to me. But that's going to be even more powerful in contextualizing the interactions and the emotion of the experience, and then again the context in terms of the surroundings, whether they be you being there physically and viewing an augmented reality, or you being there virtually and viewing it from a distance. That context, that immersion. Yanni, is that something that drew you to this medium as a creator, as a storyteller and a communicator? Because you've been very enthusiastic about this from the outset. Probably more than we can understand. I'm getting it now, But is that your take on it, or do you have a different take on this?
I mean, it's definitely part of it, right? I think there is something to interacting in a space where you can, not physically interact. But that's one of the beauties of the side network thing and the travel system, is that even if you're able to go to the physical place and you take your phone or you have your AR glasses or whatever you've got, if you're able to go to the physical place and sit down with people, that's awesome. And just that connection will just be that much deeper, just because it always is. But it is really, really wonderful that we're also able to use the site network to literally meet up around the globe. So say you meet somebody on your travels and you guys have a sit down and it's cool, but you're not able to communicate with them other than phone or Zoom. And Zoom is fine, but we all know how Zoom is. We're doing it right now. Like, we are just a bunch of screens.
Yeah.
We're talking heads at each other, and Damien's a floating voice in the back, or Eli. So that there's a disconnect right there. And when we can bring that, maybe we can't completely close the gap, but we can start to get it close enough through the virtual space and allow people to have at least a semblance of connection. It's not a true physical connection, but it's close. It starts to bring things closer. And when you're able to do that with not just the individuals, but with the characters from the world, then you create a connection, a cerebral sort of connection to a character. And I wanted to sort of address Jamie Schwartz's question in the chat here, because I think this kind of will sort of answer that. So in a co-creation world, what's it going to be like for actors who are going to be answering to a lot of different voices as authors that are all trying to act as one larger narrative storyteller? What we were just talking about there, we want to invite people in. We want people to be able to interact with one another, communicate, talk to the characters, and so on. And I have voiced my reservations about AI in general. And I think that the main characters in the storyline are really, really special. And this is something that we've all discussed before. With the main characters being special, they should also be kind of special privilege, earned, or whatever. You got to kind of work your way up to be able to work with them. And in doing so, I think, realistically, if we're going to empower the users of the platform, we should also empower the actors who perform those roles, because they're the ones who are telling that story. If that actor wants to get involved, they should be able to carry that character and tell their story for that character, what they want that character to do. Now, obviously, there's lore, there's background, there's all this stuff. But if the actor wants to do that, then the actor should be able to do it. So to answer Jamie's question, what's it going to be like? It should be limited. Characters, main characters, secondary, tertiary, probably a little easier, but main and secondary, they should really be able to control how often they're interacting. There should be probably sort of gatekeeper type things before the people get up to that point. They're rewarded with their efforts or for their efforts and so on, right? However we're going to get there. But I hope that answers Jamie's question.
That's great.
And I think it should address some of the other things that we were talking about as well.
I think so. Explaining this to Graham and Lisa, Graham, downplays the amount to which he is the driving force behind what's happening here with the site network. He is literally 24 hours a day, it seems to me, working on this and driving it forward at any given point. And although Graham is ostensibly our lead on crypto and blockchain underpinnings and so forth, which we can go into later, but is a fundamental underpinning of interoperability between different platforms, storing that information amongst other things. Graham actually wrote the metaverse playbook, which was being applied to no small feat and being applied in many cases to tourism. So I'd like to ask Graham and yourself, Lisa, how do you see this affecting tourism, standard tourism, the worlds, the environments, the locations that are featured in this book going forward? What do you think is going to happen?
I think for me, it's going to open up a new way of doing business, and it's going to change the way in which destinations think about their assets being the physical places or the things that you can do. I mean, one of the reasons I chose the examples I did in the quiz, funnily enough, is because all of them have one thing in common. There's literally nothing at those locations that you can do, see, or interact with that links them back to the films that they were made famous by. And when you consider that some of those places, and Zihuatanejo is a good example, I mean, you really have to go out of your way to go there and relive that moment in Shawshank. You know, you can't just get off a plane and get a taxi and 20 minutes later you're at that beach. You actually have to make a concerted effort of a few hours driving to get to Zihuatanejo. And then when you get there, yes, there's water, yes, there's sand, and yes, there's a town, but there's nothing there to say this is where this scene happened. And so the idea of being able to turn those destinations into something more interactive, I think in many ways is going to lead to additional visits to a certain extent, but also additional revenue depending on how you gamify and how you create the experiences that are connected to that. And you only have to look at what Disney tried to do with this, with the Star Wars, with the battle cruiser at Disney World. And I have an article about this. They didn't do particularly well with it because they promised infinite storylines, which in a way is what we're saying that you can do, because this can play out in destinations around the world. You can create new scenarios, add it to the canon, and now a new place is in play. But if you take something like a curated environment like Disney created, the problem with creating infinite experiences is that you have to do it inside a physical building, in their case, a hotel. What we're doing is re-engineering that whole idea of immersive fan engagement and interaction and saying, actually, this should play out across the world, across site network, across different destinations, and that opens up so many different opportunities. So I think what's going to happen is destinations are going to look at effectively what their assets truly are and how they can utilize this technology to create more engagement and more value for visitors.
I do want to come back to that, and I'll be bringing that back to Yanni and Eli in a second, and Damien. But before I do, Lisa, Graham mentioned the people traveling to these locations, and we've seen in the past there are issues of stimulating over tourism. Particularly, one example would be Alex Garland's book and subsequent movie adaptation, The Beach. And so many people went to that Thai island that it became, they had to ban people from it. It was damaging the environment. And there's many environments like that. If you consider Machu Picchu, which is being degraded by the amount of tourists that are walking up and down that mountain, when there's another beautiful, similarly architecturally significant mountain not 50 miles away, which is, nobody goes to because they don't know about it. What are your thoughts about the power of this kind of technology to manage over and under tourism?
Yeah, I like that you bring up that point. I've written about that actually in detail based on the protests that we see in Barcelona, in Canary Islands. There's a lot of protests going on now because a lot of it's to do with the emergence of technology and tourism being two very important industries. And when it's working well, it's working well. So Airbnb is working quite well as a technology provider in these destinations. But there's people now saying there's enough, there's enough going on. So there's limitations and there's taxes coming in now, destinations that are very popular are introducing tourism taxes. So I see, for me, at the MTA, we always say the future of travel is hybrid. So hybrid is a mixture of both, right? So you have your ability to travel, and then those who don't have the ability to travel, either for an expense or maybe they have a disability or whatever, there is an inclusive way to provide elements of that destination and allow them to feel part of or to experience the culture of a place, but not be in the place itself. So for me, that's a very interesting idea or very interesting concept that a few destinations are playing with at the moment. And with regards to what Graham said earlier, I agree with him completely. I think this is a business opportunity for tourism industry in as a whole, but for destinations and DMCs, they should be seeing it as part of their business stack now and looking at strategies and ways of incorporating AR, working alongside Yanni producers, people who are publishing books that have destinations included in them. It's very interesting as a concept to support those creators and to bring them in and look at ways of using the technology to bring those books and films to life. Genius. Yeah.
No, that's really good. And actually, before we come back to the assets with Yanni and Eli, Damien, when we were originally developing the site network concept, sorry, just get you just at the point that you put something in your mouth. Yeah, I'll talk for a bit longer, don't worry. I'm good at that. When we were setting this up, you led and guided a significant amount of market research with local individuals in different locations with different roles and stakeholders, from local school children and business owners, venue owners, tourists themselves, and asked them, which I think is always the best way to do these things, what do you need? What's the challenge? What's good? What's bad? What would make your lives easier? And I was really gratified to see the amount of the story that unfolded from this and how comprehensive it was in terms of a guide to how we can help and make things better. Could you elaborate on that a little bit for our viewers?
I mean, there was a lot of interesting stuff that came out of the research, but in simple terms, everybody recognized that there was opportunities before, during, and after the tourism experience to make a real difference to the way they operate. So I think Lisa's point around, it needs to be part of the stack. It needs to be part of the way that you think about how you operate as a player, whether that's just as a retail store. When we spoke to our retailer, one example was a guy that was selling kilts, and there's a massive market for people, but getting the sizing sorted and then supplying. And those of you that haven't worn a kilt, despite my accent, I actually live in Scotland and I have a Scottish wife. So the first time I put on my kilt was for my wedding, and it was like, oh my God, this is heavy. And this is not going to go in your luggage, I tell you, without an extra payment. So you've got a whole sort of just practical things, which if you can start engaging with people before visits and getting information from them. This is literally what we were talking with them, and then able to transact, but then get it delivered post-event and have an ongoing relationship, so that it's not just a kilt, it's being part of a location. You've got this sort of this before, middle, and after piece, which is really, really interesting. And I think I think that the research showed that. I think the other area that was very interesting, which was aligned a little bit to what Yanni was talking about, sort of creators and how we make sure that actors are appropriately engaged in the right way, is this sort of creator economy question, which is the model isn't working at the moment. It's polarizing. The very big players will be getting a lot of money, and there's everybody else. It's a long tail, and it's difficult to make that work. And I think what we saw when we were talking to someone in the entertainment space around there was very much around we can get to a much larger audience, and then we can have different economic setup, pricing, payment, to allow creators to get more of the pie. And I think that's a really, really interesting point. And I think that at the end of the day, everything follows the money. If we've got the ability to help more people, without sounding too socialist, but getting more people to get a fairer share of the pie, that's got to be a good thing. And I think that's very much part of where we're going. So yeah, lots of interesting stuff in the research, very tangible, different ways of looking at some fundamentals. And I think that will be a bit of a culture shift. It will take a little time to get over the hurdle. But once people can sort of see it, touch it, feel it, do it, use it, then I think we're going to be in a good space.
There's some very good points and a lot of stuff which is emerging from our interactions with tourist destinations. I'll come back to Broughty Castle in a second, because that's very current and very relevant to this. But before we do, you spoke of research, and Yanni, I know that, and Eli, with the breadth, the geographical and historical breadth and depth of your series of novels, a great deal of research has to occur. And I understand that both from a writer's and producer's perspective and from an actor's perspective to get this right. What we had been noticing was that this medium was enabling us to communicate directly with people who were local, so that we weren't just going for the secondary, here's the book says this location has this history. But when you turn up and you get talking to locals and they say, well, I'll take you to somewhere that's off the beaten track, and I'll show you this, and I'll tell you the history of what really happened here. And it really, really highlights things, hidden gems, both culturally and historically and physically. What are your thoughts in terms of being able to utilize this potentially as research for your novels, as a means of research?
Oh, I think it's awesome. When I wrote the books, it was years ago. And the amount of stuff that was available to access on the internet, as far as just tourist research, really is all I was able to do. There was historical research, but what I was writing was all pretty much modern times. So how much historical stuff am I going to pull out of it? I had included Dunnottar Castle and a couple other areas in Volume 1 that were they were historical in their placement and their structure, but I didn't really go into the history of those, of the locations in the books. But being able to do this as far as how the rest of this TV series moves forward with the all the volumes of the book are done, but they're all still in edit. Like right now I'm wrapping up the edit on Volume 2, and it's been a totally different experience being able to access so much more information. Speaking with, they were just calling whoever that's in a local space and be like, what's it like down there? They're like, who are you and why are you talking to me? Then I explained it, and then they're like, oh, okay. But it's great. And I think for people, travelers, readers, viewers, whatever, participants in the world, once they start going into a place, when they're able to create their characters, and then, I've got, the book world, but as they're creating theirs and I'm creating the kind of background lore, there are going to be fixed points in time that are fixed in our real world history that we can travel back to, we can explore, we can do whatever, all the way back to, the Merovingian kings are they're the kings in the book. So their dynasty started in 481 AD, if I remember correctly, and 481 is, that's a lot of time between then and now for people to literally create anything you want. You can create Roman stories about knights and kings and whatever, and invaders from one land and raiders from another, and pirates, and do whatever you want. There's so much to play with, and being able to go to a local place and talk to a local from wherever it's at. Let's just say I just threw out pirates the last thing. So let's say they go to the Caribbean or I don't know, the Indonesia or something. And you want to talk about the different, who you talk to the locals and find out about some secret cove that pirates went to or whatever. You can do it. And it's different from before, where if you call, like right now, like when I'm calling people up and they're like, who are you? Like, then, this creates an interconnectedness and closeness with the community, and a borderline relationship that you otherwise wouldn't have.
So, at the risk of overusing the word immersion in this immersive technology, but that kind of research from a creator standpoint, you've made it very clear. Elijah, from your perspective as an actor, I mean, I know there's like historical precedent of the likes of, say, Mel Gibson before he did Braveheart, coming and spending a lot of time in Scotland and living with the Scottish family to really immerse himself in mostly the language, although he never kind of got the accent quite right. But anyway, but he did his best. But that's all very well if you're that kind of actor and you're going to one location. The nature of this story is it takes place all over the world, and there's not the time or the budget to go to all of those places. But what are your thoughts on potentially using this immersive technology to immerse yourself in local cultures and local attitudes and just styles and ways of being, where you might not be able to do that physically?
No, I think that's great. It saves a lot of money because I don't have to like fly there to actually immerse myself in it and meet locals and go to restaurants and all that jazz. But so I think this is groundbreaking for sure. I am seemingly method, like I would go the extra mile. And Yanni, he'll tell you this, like my research, I'm quite savvy at that because it's really about telling the truth, as an actor. Not so much about like, the performance, if I did it great or not or what have you, but it's really, did I honor this character? And how can I do that while I'm looking at the socioeconomic and the political structure of the world the character is in? And so I have to go back, even have to go back, even the backstory, what life he lived, where would he have gone to school or church, or who was in power at that time? How did that influence his education and what he wants to be in life? So all of that is important. So being able to have access to that remotely would be fire because obviously I'm gonna be in the environment. It's the model itself is a replica of what's there. And if my mind is in it, from a sensory experience, then that is gonna have, I think it's gonna wake up a lot of that, visceral connection that actors love so much. Gonna wake up a lot of that, where I'll be able to tell the story authentically, because my mind was there for space and time, if that makes sense.
It does, and actually, you'd been speaking earlier about the physicality of communication as well, and it's certainly been raised to me. And Lisa, you might want to come in on this bit of it as well. People have different means of communicating, different body languages, different styles. And in Glasgow, for instance, we have a very different vernacular where words that would otherwise be deleted are just punctuation for us, and sometimes terms of endearment. But there's also the physical motions and movements which can in some cases come across quite aggressively but aren't meant so. And these are just some examples. In Chinese language there's a lot more tonality than in some of the Western languages, which are more to do with the sibilants, etc. So what are your thoughts in terms of being able to use these fully immersive tools where you can see and hear and engage more of the locals as a means to preparing for your role, or preparing for how you interact with those roles, even if it is to say my character is out of context here and is actually misinterpreting this local means of communication?
No, that's great. Engagement is key. What I have found, and as I said, I'm seemingly method, because I don't think I don't have the budget or time to travel and to do these things like locally. But I would go to YouTube, or if I can find a group that's local, I'll go there and I'll talk to the group and spend time and so on. But now this is completely different. It's giving me real world experience in a simulated fashion, right? So it's and it's gonna make the actor's job a lot smoother. You consider any high level profession, let's say astronauts, they have a simulated reality before they're actually out there in space, and to prepare them for what to expect from interactions to even their own selves. You know what I mean? Like either their fears or whatever. And it all comes back to being consciously and physically present, and as an actor, that's the best place to be. Now I'm going to be having a meaningful conversation. It could be an argument, it could be, but it's real, it's organic, and it's happening in an environment where the actor will be placed in, and I'm having that experience as Damien Elijah, sure, but I'm playing Troy, and it's like making things real under imaginary circumstance. There's more to that now because it's not necessarily imaginary anymore. I'm actually there, and I think it's gonna inform my work. It's gonna make it a lot more rich. More underbelly and truth is gonna be there. Um, Even tonality with how some of the locals may talk, and I may have a better understanding of how to get information from them as my character because I've already had the experience with interacting.
That's wonderful, and that really does lend itself interacting to the accessibility piece of it. And there's many people from around the world that they have movies take place in their location, but they don't feel seen. I mean, Moana being a key example, the first one, they felt that one of the main characters had been hopelessly mistyped against what that god character was meant to be. But then subsequently with Moana 2, they went completely the opposite direction and really went into, I think it was launched in the indigenous language before it was launched in the English language, which I thought was a beautiful recognition of the locality and the culture. And it was a recognition not only by the directors and writers like Yanni there, but by the actors and everybody involved like yourself to highlight the importance of this. Now, we're running out of time a little bit. I don't know, Graham, if we've got time to speak briefly to the Broughty Castle example. Could you maybe summarise that just very briefly?
Yeah, sure. So, just for everyone to be aware, we're involved in a campaign to save a castle in Scotland. This castle is having to close down due to costs being difficult for the local council to continue to fund. And we've been involved in a proposal to create both a virtual copy of the castle, but also an augmented reality trail around the castle grounds, as well as looking at how we can create events related to the castle. The castle actually has an area outside of it, which in theory you could do events in, but there's actually hidden tunnels, like secret bunkers and all sorts of stories about ghosts and things in there. But because it's above that, you can't actually do physical events outside the castle. So we're looking at how we can utilize the technology to create revenue streams to keep the castle open. And as those conversations happen, we'll feed back into our community and let you know how it's going.
Just very briefly on that point, that there are so many ways with digital technology where there's the unlimited accessibility and objects which you can have multiplied ad infinitum, which you cannot in the physical world, the accessibility piece as well. But in this case, owning a brick of this castle is a possibility, and it's something that you can visit the castle before Choose the Brick, and then when you do go and physically visit, which we've seen to be encouraged anywhere between 20 and 40% beyond any other form of tourism marketing or destination marketing, you will then be able to use augmented reality to see and identify the stone of that castle that you own. So that's all pretty cool. And then just at the very last point, this is a major point in the Shadow of a King series that Yanni, you have a series of objects within the story, like the swords and the masks and so forth, that you're very keen to allow people to be able to access as digital assets that they can own, and even digital. Hate that word, but anyway, physical and digital combined. Where if they were to buy the real world asset or prop, then they would also be able to utilize and inhabit that mask.
In the I got my favorite one here. This one, this is the one that appears in the trailer that we saw, and as the story progresses, this mask will evolve, and so will all the other ones. And that's where we want people to come in, so they can also help design masks. They can do, literally take their part in the thing and have their piece of design or creation or digital sculpt or whatever they want to do, and then we can create those assets in the digital space, as well as have them made 3D printed, whatever we're going to do.
Super cool. And I think it doesn't take a great stretch of the imagination to see how that can translate into tourism and souvenir culture as well. So, and I know that we've been going for an hour and 30 minutes. Will you believe it? It feels like we've just been going for 20 minutes, but you guys have been fantastic. So I just want to thank you, Yanni, for your engagement in this and all the concepts that you've come up with. And thank you so much, Eli, for joining us and giving us your unique perspective as an actor, integral, vital part of this. Of course, Damien and Graham, who are my incredible slave driving co-owners in this whole endeavor, and Lisa, who's been a stalwart support and given us so much information and comprehension of all of the requirements, the needs, and the potential benefits in the tourism industry with her unique combined perspective in this and technology. Thank you, everyone. And I'll pass you back to Graham just for final notes.
Yes, and just to end, I think it's been a really, really interesting stream. I think there's going to be some really exciting material in there for the community. And just to end, in terms of the shadow world and everything Yanni is doing, some of you will be thinking about things like, will there be a Shadow World Founders token, or how can I get early access to something like the Shadow World? Because I know how our community thinks, and I can tell you that the early access to Shadow World will be based on owning the book. So you do need the book in the Shadow of a King in order to get early access to the platform. And as well as the book, we will be minting a founder's token for the Shadow World, which will get you access. So if you want to find out more about the project and keep up to date with the development of the Shadow World, you can do that at Yanni's website, which is itsoakdevelopment.com. ITSOAK development.com. And I would just like to finally thank all of our guests as well for their input in what's been an amazing stream. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you all on the next This Week in a Metaverse very soon. Take care, all.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.